afternoon once again. It is my pleasure to announce our fourth and the only joint keynote lecture given by Professor Peter Schreiner and Professor Isabel Grimm-Stadelmann. Any of you who have any touch with Byzantology probably know of Professor Schreiner. He has been for many years a professor at the university in Cologne. He's retired now. He has been the editor-in-chief of the Byzantinische Zeitschrift for 12 years.
Yes, 12 years.
And the president of the and the president of the Association for Byzantine Studies for 10. And he has
well informed. Thank you.
And he has numerous honored redoctorates from many universities, including the University of Belgrade. And Professor Isabel Grimm-Stadelmann is at the University of Munich at the Institute for Ethics and the History of Medicine.
Yes, I'm a little bit combined. I'm also attached to the Institute of Byzantine Studies, and I'm attached to the Institute of Medical History because I'm graduated.
And the Bavarian Academy of Sciences, yes.
Okay.
And she's an expert on the history of medicine and science, particularly Byzantine, and I think this is going to be a very interesting lecture, so without further ado, I'm giving the floor to our guests.
I thank you for these warm words and correct words. Yes, that is not always the case. We have divided the text of our conference. For me, that's more the historical part, and for my colleague Isabel, more the medical part of medical history, not medical part. And we change during the conference at this time at 3 o'clock. That's better for you to hear two voices because after a lunch it's always difficult a little bit to hear a conference. I remember I have many for myself many experiences. No? Well, medicine in the service of political calculation in Byzantium. That's an interesting title which invented we together. A short introduction. I excuse my voice. My voice is not worked for the moment very well. I hope that I can read the text till the end. And yeah, let's see. I have wait a little bit. I have, with the help of the Serbian waters, Gala. This is not Kniaz Miloš, but also a good water. A broad variety of sources related to the Byzantine imperial history mentions quite a wide range of affections, diseases, this is also a diseases and illnesses that render numerous emperors either permanently or temporarily unfit to rule. That's the title of our general title of our conference. In some cases, however, political calculations led to a sticking to some persons, in most cases for dynastic reasons, because of them being bearers of legitimacy, albeit they were clearly unsuitable for the office of ruler due to their numerous physical infirmities, as, for example, the mortally wounded young Staurakios in a battle against the Bulgarians, who ruled for only a few months before his death in 812.
But nevertheless, we know of at least one Byzantine emperor who must have received extremely high qualified medical care after his downfall, although we do not know any of his physicians by name. And this is Justinian II Rhinotmetos with a cut-off nose. And he sets the most significant example of an overthrown ruler, physically mutilated by having cut off his nose. We don't see this on the coins, of course, but in fact is a physical disability that should actually disqualify him for the office of emperor, but who nevertheless regains the throne with the help of his skillful physicians, who not only healed his injury carefully, but also fitted him a silver nose prosthesis as an artificial replacement of the lost original. Of course, this does not really restore Justinian to a physically intact person, but notwithstanding this, after his violent return to the throne, he is deemed fit to rule, being some kind of revenant due to his bearership of legitimacy. And this is the main thing, bearership of legitimacy. And that's very important. Above all, Justinian's example shows very clearly that the question of the ruler's physical qualification is by no means a unique characteristic, a characteristicum sine qua non, but it is very much subject to political calculations and can be interpreted accordingly. The impression Justinian Rhinotmetos made on his contemporaries must have been formative and lasting, for it is interesting to note that this very example has found a small but undeniable echo even in the medical literature. As we can read in a treatise on the structure of the human body, probably composed at the turn of the 9th to the 10th century and handed down by the name of a Theophilos. We do not know nothing about him. The following remark explaining appearance and purpose of the nose. And this is the manuscript I've given here, but this is very a pity that we have this black thing here. I don't know how, because this is one of the main manuscripts handing down this treatise at the Parisinus Graecus of the 14th, at the turn of 13th and 14th century. No, this is great. Thank you, Nina. And here we can read the text which I bring now in the translation. Why was the nose created in such a way and of such a shape? Perhaps for the sake of ornament? For people who have, and now it comes, who have been mutilated and have lost the tips of their noses, are so ugly that they are disgusting to all who see them. And here we can read it, Ais histoitis they are. Therefore, the nose was created for the sake of adornment. Moreover, it is a channel for the ingress and egress of the air which flows into it. Our medical author makes also clear, and this is very interesting indeed, that the visible body of the nose, which is to be cut off for mutilation's sake, as we have seen before, is not considered a vital organ sine qua non. And apart from physical mutilations or more or less grave diseases and illnesses afflicting Byzantine emperors and limiting or completely preventing their abilities to rule properly and rendering them unfit to rule, there are also some examples to be found in the sources where physicians do not play the charitable and caring role that should be their due, but to the contrary, showing them as involved into conspirations against some emperors in order to eliminate them as far as possible without sensation and sustainable. The most popular means of doing this are various poisons, which are either produced or mixed together by court physicians or administered by them in the form of cleansing agents, which insinuated therapeutical value. And this is the subject of a very large and thorough study by the colleague Ioannis Laskaratos in Athens, who did this analysis from the toxicological point. And now Peter.
Yeah. And now we come back to a historical or more historical chapter entitled Character and Start Yeah. Character and Status of the Byzantine Emperor. In 1143, Emperor John II stayed on a military campaign in Asia Minor against the Seljukids, which took a highly unfortunate course. In the previous year, 42, his firstborn sons, Alexius and Andronicus, had already been carried off by unspecified illnesses. His third son, Isachius, had brought the deceased brothers home by ship. Only the youngest son, the mentioned above Manuel, had remained at his father's side in the camp and became therefore an eyewitness to the events described as following. An unusual hunting accident happened to the emperor when he injured himself with a supposedly poisoned arrow. The accident itself and the subsequent course of events up to its fatal end is described in detail by the chronists Niketas Choniates and Ioannis Kinamos. I cite, the poisoning spread and progressed to the vital organs. Gradually, the limbs grew cold and died, and the emperor soon gave up his spirit. Exceptionally, and this is really exceptionally, because normally we have only few concrete dates, but this is a good combination of dates in the so-called short chronicles and by the historians Kinamos and Niketas Choniates. And in this combination, we know quite all, and I could cite these passages. Exceptionally, we possess all the relevant dates. The accident happened on March 22nd, and after 18 days, on April 8th, the emperor died at the age of 57 years. I have written only 57 years, but it is only maybe not correct because in the Byzantine epoch, 57 years was a good age. No? Not today; it's a young man. We know the unexpected illness, which the emperor initially concealed from the physicians accompanying his campaign. We should know that during military campaigns, always some physicians were present, not only physicians, but also a small or bigger medical library. These physicians were present, but unfortunately, we do not know any names. And immediately demanded securing the succession, the emperor. Considering the topic of our conference, unfit to rule, the argumentation of the emperor reported by William of Tyros, the Western historians of the Crusades, justifying his rejection of the amputation suggested by the physicians is quite interesting. No, the answer of the emperor in the chronicle of William of Tyrus. Citation. Wilhelm von Tyrus said, although he, the emperor, did not doubt that he was threatened with death, he is said to have replied that it was unworthy that the Roman Empire should be ruled with only one hand. No, the physicians would have had the amputation of the right or the left. I don't know what which hand. You know it.
This is not.
It is not written. Yeah.
By the chronicle.
No, he was poisoned. He was poisoned here or here. So the physicians would cut off the right or the left hand, and he said it's unworthy that the Roman Empire, the empire, the ruler is significant, is identified with the empire, that the empire should be ruled with only one hand. Excuse me. According to Nicetas Coniates, Emperor John II thus evades his ambitious and patronizing but absolutely incompetent physicians and unmistakably declines their disparate and ineffective suggestions. Thus he proves himself to be a ruler of strong character and displays a true ruler's dignity. The paradox of this situation, however, is that the emperor, although terminally ill and therefore physically unfit to rule, nevertheless proves to be fit to rule in terms of his personality and strength of character. John's strength of character and ability to rule, though he has this illness, mortally illness, is also demonstrated by his swift and effective initiative to arrange his succession to avoid riots after his demise. After having dealt with the facts, we will have a closer look into the background of constitutional law. Now, we are speaking here on a faculty of law, and I would like to say something about law and constitutional law. John, the old emperor, proposed his 25-year-old son Manuel as successor to the army. This was in midst of the army in Asia Minor. His father's authority secured the army's approval of Manuel's appointment. Not to forget, Manuel was the youngest son, and this was against all the tradition. While his elder, two brothers were dead, we heard it, and his elder brother, the third in the rank, his elder brother Isacius, was far away in the distant capital, some 2,000 kilometers far from the camp of the emperor. His elder brother Isacius, in the distant capital, had the run of the mill. He was not in the near the emperor and has nothing to say. But we are in Byzantium, in the Eastern Roman Empire, but the imminent danger was not yet averted. Therefore, a formal coronation was performed. John himself, the old emperor, tied a purple bandage around Manuel's head and threw a purple coat or a red coat. That's quite, it's not the same, but in this case it's the same. Purple, red and purple are the same things, and threw a purple coat over him. The mentioned ceremony took place on March 31st, 31st, when the Emperor John was still in good health. You remember, only 8 days later he died, and fit to carry out the proclamation, being relevant for constitutional law. But it's not so simple in Belgians. Nothing is simple there. But nevertheless, a second decisive act still was lying ahead. Manuel had to bring the capital. Manuel, the young coronated emperor, has bring the capital as well as the court into his hand, albeit his arriving in Constantinople almost 3 months later. Well, it's what a big distance, more than 2,000 kilometers. We know the date, June 27th. Now begins again. The capital's population, especially the clergy, accepted Manuel as the new emperor, thanks to large gifts of money. It's a clear case of corruption. No, that's actual. Now, in our times, everywhere, in Germany, in Serbia, in Bulgaria, corruption. No, it's an ancient, a very, very ancient instrument, but this is a clear case. His coronation by the patriarch, it was necessary, a coronation by the patriarch. No, a civil coronation by the old emperor, and an ecclesiastical, let's not completely exact, ecclesiastical coronation, but I say here that's more simple. His ecclesiastical coronation by the patriarch. But in this moment, end of the June, the old patriarch was dead, and there was not elected a new patriarch. Only Manuel, after his arriving in Constantinople, appointed a new patriarch, and the new patriarch, the coronation or the application of the new patriarch took place only in autumn 1133, and so also a coronation of the new emperor Manuel was now possible, but it was a minor matter from the legal point of view, and Niketas Choniates, for example, mentioned this coronation by the patriarch only in 3 or 4 words. This was a let's just say quantity negligible. Not always, but in the most cases, the coronation, the presence of the patriarch was a quantity negligible. The status of the emperor in the Eastern Roman Empire, why all this theater? The status of the emperor in the Eastern Roman Empire has strong foundations dating back to the time of Augustus, and based on their acceptance by the changing governmental power factors. This is the people of the capital, the court, and the army. and depend also the high clerical persons in Constantinople. In Manuel's case, the emperor first enforced his wish to hand over to succession to a certain member of his family, his son Manuel. John preferred his son Manuel. That was a possibility. To carry this out, in first instance, he had to convince his officers. But equally, the capital citizens and the clergy had to be won over by means of the gold and silver and gifts, corruption. So this is I'm not against corruption in certain conditions. The mere genealogical succession known to Western rulership, and this morning we have spoken much about succession and Western rulership, was actually meaningless, quite meaningless in the Eastern Roman Empire, and therefore always required specific confirmation. Initially, the appointment of a new emperor was an act of constitutional law without consideration of his physical qualities in first instance. Full possession of physical health and mental strength thereby is a self-evident fact emphasized by all the relevant sources in an almost stereotypical manner, which maybe even might suggest some kind of legal formula. But this remains in the state of assumption. We know much about these facts, but we didn't know all, and needs to be researched more thoroughly and in detail, but not here.
Yeah, but now for the medical point, let's stick a little while to the newly appointed Emperor Manuel I. You can see him here on the slide, to whom all sources attest outstanding medical knowledge. And this is really very interesting, and it's a speciality of this emperor, because we know no other emperor with these medical skills and also therapeutical skills, why he justifiably could be called a kind of filiatos, a medical dilettante, in the best sense of this word, on the imperial throne. Citation: Manuel's involvement in the field of healthcare was not limited to the formal and traditional interests and the hospital policy of the state, but it was more apparent and personal because he himself practiced actually medicine. And this citation is from the article by John Laskaratos and Markitos about these medical skills of Manuel in the Journal of Medical Biography. A source, a very good source for Manuel's medical activities, we have this Eustatius of Thessaloniki, who refers to Manuel as the healing emperor, who treated very serious, even life-threatening diseases successfully, and he adds that he had special experience in diseases considered difficult to treat, which he dealt with skillfully. Eustatius continues his report by stating that the emperor strictly followed the Hippocratic principle in his treatments. According to Evstatios, the emperor discovered effective drugs which were made available in plentiful amounts to patients and their physicians without charge. And this is also very remarkable and important because this is a noticeable reference to the Anagyri, the saints dedicated to medical wisdom and medical knowledge, which goes hand in hand with the concept of imperial philanthropia.
Painted in Neresy, no?
Yes.
In the Neresy monastery.
Yes, exactly. That's.
Now we are here in Serbia, no?
Of course.
We can mention Neresy in a conference in Germany. Nobody knows what is Neresy.
But here
I
it's
hope
great.
you know it.
And these remedies being paid for from public funds. The emperor had great experience of the earlier drugs and used them in the most effective way. This is a very impressive example, I think, for an emperor not even being fit to rule, but also fit to therapy and fit to exert medical knowledge.
And
now,
fit make to rule. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. And now we have to change this. I'm fit to do this. So I think, and now we have prepared some, and this will be a lot of examples about the imperial health care. The emperor and the physicians, that's the wide subject, the wide topic, but we will go a little bit in detail, but unfortunately we have not the time to stay or to stick to the examples very broadly and very wide. We remember all the Emperor John II, the father of Manuel. We have seen that it was obvious for physicians to attend to the emperor on military campaigns, albeit the physicians of John II were not very effective. And this evidently is part of a very long tradition, the physicians be accompanying not being not effective, to be traced back to antiquity and even beyond. And I think you know a lot of about Egyptian physicians being reported off in military campaigns and even ordered by letters to come over to the neighbor country to help and to share their skills. And this is quite the same with the Byzantine physicians on the military campaigns. And in this context, the question arises to what extent the physicians surrounding the emperors emphasize in their professional activities the person of the imperial patient. And this is one of the main questions we have wondered about. Is it really important, the person of the imperial patient according to medical ethics, or rather the maintenance of the ruling power, rendering the emperor fit to rule without regard to his individual welfare? And this is really a great question. Following this, we continue wondering to what extent the emperor is dependent on his physicians in order to fulfill his role, proving to be fit to rule, but also to what extent the physicians represent a stately function. For the first example, here we are. For the first example, let's stay a little longer with the Comnenian dynasty and concentrate on Manuel's grandfather, Emperor Alexios I, we can here see on the left side, who suffered from 3 clinical patterns in total, the last of which led to his agonizing death. We can understand his entire medical case history very well through the extremely precise and detailed description by his highly educated, and not only in the field of medicine, daughter Anna, who also was a filiatros, who gave a concise report of the development and course of her father's disease in her Alexias. Initially, Alexios suffered from gout and was treated also during his numerous military campaigns, not by his physicians, but by the empress herself, who, according to Anna, her daughter, had developed an elaborated and soothing massage technique. However, the emperor's suffering increased into some kind of chronic cause triggered by an accident during a polo match when an errant polo ball hit the emperor's knee with full force and causing an exacerbation of his gout condition and intensification of the periodically recurring pain related. The resulting temporary bedriddeness of the emperor and thus his regularly recurring absences from his ruling duties, temporarily being unfit to rule, led to on the one hand to increasing doubts about his fitness for the imperial office, and on the other hand even to open ridicule on the part of his political opponents. So it is said that his enemies, in fact the Seljuk Sultan of Iconium, Gliziaslan, and his entourage, made the Byzantine emperor's illness the subject of improvised satirical parodies being performed in course of their drinking parties, which of course was disastrous in terms of foreign affairs. In addition to the gout, as we can see from Anna's report, the emperor was also suffering from a kind of burnout syndrome caused by psychological stress, which Anna blames on her hated brother, the later Emperor John II, we know now by the moment very well. And in this part of her report, which is highly interesting, Anna uses medical terminology for the first time in her account. And evident physical and mental exhaustion was also a reason for this burnout syndrome due to demanding audiences lasting too long. Sometimes not only all the day, but also for a large part of the night, especially with the representatives of the Western Crusaders, whose ruthlessness Anna openly denounces. During these audiences, the emperor was forced by etiquette to stand upright for a very long time, which in addition to exhaustion and in view of his suffering from chronic gout, posed an even greater challenge for his health and physical condition. And his final and ultimately fatal illness is defined by Constantinos Alexandrides as a myocardial infarct, triggered by an interaction between the existing and aggravated suffering from gout and a chill caused by draught air. On this occasion, for the first time, a medical council had been convened, consisting of some experts, and these experts we know by name, and chaired, and this is important, by Anna herself, who also was an expert in the field of medicine. The present physicians discussed not only the current situation and condition of the emperor in terms of medical language, which is also used and precisely reported by Anna, but also the therapeutical possibilities. And the concilium ended up, and this is also very interesting, in a vote for the therapeutical concepts to be performed, and even Anna, as the chairperson of the concilium, was strictly against the majority's vote, considered by both her, Anna, and the one another physician, Nikolaus Kallikles, was subjected to the voting results. And after a recovery period of several days, during which the disease appeared to have stopped, heart failure occurred, accompanied by pulse arrhythmia, dyspnea, which later turned into orthopnea, fluid retention in the abdomen and legs, edemata and swellings in the mouth, which caused breathing and swallowing difficulties, and finally diarrhea. The before-mentioned medical council meets again, but even now no agreement can be reached on the necessary measures, and they limit themselves to palliative measures. Anna and also Yannis Tsonaras, the chronist, who also reports on the emperor's illness and death, unanimously emphasize the ineffectiveness of the sessions of the medical council caused by the physicians' helplessness, even though they were all considered luminaries in their field. Emphasis is also placed on the imperial patient's dignity, with which he accepted his fate, proving himself, despite his physical weakness, to be ideally fit to rule and of strong character until his last breath. Shall I continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not here.
Yeah. And we also know about a medical council about the Emperor Isa Komnenos, of which Psellos speaks, but we will leave it out because it's due to time. But this
and we have many pictures. That's now the most interesting part.
You are just wanting to show the horrid pictures.
Yes.
So we do now some further examples of diseases of the Byzantine emperor. We've listed them just for having an overview, and I will go through them very shortly, and then you can have your horrid pictures about medical punishments. And this
are your pictures.
No, your picture. Okay. But now the first one is diseases of old age, and we've listed here some bibliography, and this indeed is important because it's in some published in some medical special medical journals, which are for Byzantinists and for historians not very good to read, and so we've listed them. And if someone is interested in, just ask us. And we can share it. So we have a lot of Byzantine emperors, and it's an amazing amount believed to have suffered from suspected dementia. For example, Justine I, who showed progressive cognitive and behavioral decline, recognized even by the people of the Byzantine capital. And then Justinian I, who died at 83 years of age, manifesting curious behavior towards the end of his life, so that his wife, the famous Theodora, undertook his duties for some time. And we are not sure, however, whether indeed dementia or some combination of old age paired with suffering from gout and possibly from prostrate benign hyperplasia, increasing loss of memory due to old age. These are a lot of possibilities. Constantine VIII died at the age of 73 and had many health problems, being tortured by senility and diseases, as the chronist Ephraim tells us. And Tsonaras and Psellos report some kind of degeneration of physical and mental capacities and progressive senility. Maybe the degeneration of all systems was denoting memory disorders, deterioration of verbal skills, apathy or motor problems, and led to a fatal stroke. Very interesting is also the Empress Zoe, who died at the age of over 70 years and showed symptoms of cognitive failure, hand tremor, and this is maybe a sign of Parkinson's disease, gradual deafness attributed to brain damage, anorexia, sudden impulses, combination, and this combination speaks clearly in favor of Parkinson's disease. And then we have, in all these various reports made by different historians and chroniclers, it is striking that no physicians at all involved are mentioned. The question is still also not whether the old-aged emperor is considered to be fit or unfit to rule, but whether his state of health and physical decay is simply described by the chroniclers without any comment on his qualification to rule. We have some examples also about depression, burnout, mania, as we have seen before, and We have heard a little bit about young Stavrakios, who ruled in 811 only for a few weeks, and he was considered to be fit to rule despite his grave and lethal war injuries, and the fact that he was the only available bearer of imperial legitimacy outweighs his physical condition, which clearly makes him not at all fit to rule, but no physicians dealing with his case are mentioned in the sources. And we know, and this is very interesting, we also know from the chroniclers about neurological diseases. We have mentioned the supposed Parkinson disease of Empress Zoe, but there are also some cases of assumed strokes being the reason for the fatal illnesses of some Byzantine emperors. For example, Alexander, and I have a picture, an image of the Emperor Alexander on his deathbed, and he died supposedly of a stroke caused by cerebral hemorrhage. And also Manuel II Paleologus, who died of hemiplegia, which also might be connected to a double attack of stroke. The first being a paralytic stroke in October 1422, and his son John VIII having carried on with imperial negotiations until November 1422, and he was in this case clearly considered as not fit to rule, as unfit to rule, and the second and fatal stroke occurred in July 1425 and left him without ability to converse, quite speechless, and the Greek sources say it's a kind of aphasia. The evidence is strongly reinforced by the absence of any witness to identify Manuel's ability to converse, as the emperor never appeared anywhere again and never accepted any visitor or embassy except his family and the intimate of the court, the historians Francis. And then we have some cases of epilepsy and urogenital diseases, and this is the striking example is Justine II again, who was suffering from prostate cancer or from strangury or a combination of both together with mental disturbances. And there is a very interesting fact in his case history, because he had to be to be performed a very grave medical operation, which was finally it was lethal. But he had the physicians to be performing this operation got their knife, their operation knife, from the emperor himself, just as a kind of legal making sure that it is also the will of the patient. And that's very interested in a case of medical law. And then we have some supposed dermatological diseases, which might be also the reason for poisoning the emperor, as in the case of Romanos III Argyros, who should... Michael Psellos is not very clear about this, but there might be a diagnosis about a dermatological disease like leprosy, and he was given injections by Helleborus, and Laskaratos is convinced that this might be some kind of slow poisoning, which leads to the making this emperor out of unfit to rule and unfit to see what is happened really. And then, yes, what are the consequences for the rulership when we're letting pass by all these diseases and all these patterns? Generally, it was tried to not to let the illness become public. And this is the main duty and main obligation of the physicians. But this very often leads to the opposite effect. The emperor becomes all the more vulnerable, as we have seen in the case of before mentioned Romanos III, and his physicians themselves frequently are involved in plots against the emperors. And this is also mentioned by the illness of Constantinus IX Monomachus, and he developed a special writing technique to hide his disease, and also Michael VI was shielded by the courtiers from the publicity, not to make known that he suffered from epilepsy. And now it's your turn.
Yes, that's...
now they are the horrid pictures. To wake you up.
Some examples of measures. We mentioned Justinian II, Rhinometos, and this characteristic name, the emperor with the nose cut off. All the Byzantine historians mention this cognomen Rhinometos. It's a prime example. It's a large chapter, and I have here only a few examples. Romanos III, Diogenes, who lost the battle against the Seljukids, one of the few famous battles in the Byzantine history, was, like as earlier Michael Calafate, blinded. And blinding was the central punishment, not only for emperors, but also for all persons, the high officers, and so on. And we have here some examples how to blind. There are some possibilities, 2 or 3 possibilities. We know very much about the blinding of person and kill all the details. There is a big old book of the editor of Panaritos, Lampsidis. Thank you, yeah. Of Odysseus Lampsidis, one of his first books, more than 100 pages written in Greek, more than 100. So it is not to diffuse this book. More than 100 pages about the methods of blinding, and also in some illustrations we have these examples. This is only to say it only for mention.
And there are also medical texts speaking about these different sorts of blinding. We can see here with some measurements, with some things, and here with supposedly with oil or with some hot fluidum. And we do not speak now about castration measures, because there will be a paper by Konstantinos Diados later on, and he will deal with this subject.
Quite all Byzantine emperors which was deposed were also blinded, because to cut off the nose, this is not so important, we have seen, but to blind, that's completely, he is out of all official positions. And we have, if I remember well, no person, no emperor, or no person who has been emperor and reinstalled as an emperor who was blinded. This was completely finished. The career was completely finished, not only for the emperor, but for all who were blinded. So we have many cases, Isaac Angelos, I couldn't read now, we have not the time, Andronicus Komnenos, the famous case for, he was not only blinded, this was the last method, but before he was cut off all his members of the corps. This was an awful execution made by the, so it is written, made by the people, and finally he was blinded, and this was the finished. Johannes Lascarus, blinded on command of the usurpator Michael the Eighth. Pachymeres said a mild method of blinding, not mortal, because blinding was there are possibilities to cure the blinding, but if the blinding was very cruelly, this was not possible, and the persons who decided, who made the blinding, this was only by two persons and in presence of Yadros.
We don't know exactly whether it was in Yadros or whether it was some kind of
also,
theory.
John IV Lascarus, mild method of blinding. Andronicus IV Palaiologos, usurpator against John V Palaiologos, mind in form of the mild blending, and we have the information that drugs came from Egypt, to make Jews on the ace of the Emperor Andronicus and his son John VII, and John VII was evidently healed by these drugs because he was later on for one year and a half also emperor. But let us for the end. Has you some interesting pictures? No. No.
About the age of the final, but this is the final.
Better the blinding. Yeah.
This is the final one.
Let us speak in the last chapter about the age of the emperors and their rise to power. From the previous chapters, we have seen how physical and mental health or illness were important facts for performing the imperial office. Equally important would be considered the age factor, especially at the time of assuming the imperial reign. However, the question of age is only relevant if the imperial rule is within the framework of dynastic succession and does not follow the sole principle of proclamation with the aim of replacing the old dynasty. Generally, I said it, the firstborn son takes over the imperial rule regardless of age. In the case of the early or unexpected death of an emperor, the ruling power does not go to the empress or the emperor's brother, but is taken over by a son who also could be still of minor age. Since, of course, he cannot perform if he has 2 years, 3 years, we have some examples, since he cannot perform imperial ruling, his mother, a relative or any official or even a council of regency takes over. The full assumption of imperial functions is dependent on legal capacity, which was based on Roman law. Behind this is a medical question, and only by this reason we mention this fact here in this conference. Behind this is a medical question of determining maturity, the details of which cannot be discussed here. In civil life, girls were considered mature in the age of 12 and boys in the age of 14. These norms were particularly relevant for marriages and were generally also valid in the imperial dynasty. Also, there were always political exceptions related. We know of only a few cases in Byzantine Empire when a successor on the throne was underage and when the emperor died, and therefore the mechanism of the regency came in. Even if the young emperor had reached, and this is very important, even if the young emperor had reached the age to rule, fit to rule, and the regency should have been over, he was also officially fit to rule. His first task always was to win over the regency more or less forcefully. Constantine VI was only 9 years old when his father Leon IV died. His mother Irene took over, the famous Irene, in the time of Charlemagne, took over the regency, but aspired to emperorship herself, so that her son was just able to rule for a very short period before he had him. What had the mother done? Blinded his son in 797, which him rendered unfit to rule. Constantine VII, the famous Porphyrogenitus, became emperor in 912 at the age of 7 and managed to get rid of the regency in 920 at the age of 15. But it is not the end. But nevertheless, he remained under the curatorship of his father-in-law until 944 and was sole ruler for only the last 15 years of his life. When his son Romanos II died in 963, his son Basilius, the famous Bulgaroctonos, was probably only 5 years old. It was only at the age of 20 in 976 that he succeeded to free himself from the adversaries and to fight for ruling independently. 1258, John, just mentioned, John IV Lascaris was imprisoned for 11 years by Michael VIII as a result of a coup d'etat, and another emperor, John V Palaiologos, was under the tutorship of his father-in-law, John Cantacusenos, until he was 22. The above-mentioned examples of minors taking over the ruling power with the assistance of regency show that this endeavor was also fraught with difficulties and even failed completely. The political forces to keep away minors from ruling because of their youthful age have been consistently strong over all the centuries. Even reaching legal and physical majority was not enough in Byzantium to gain the imperial power without problems. The emperorship was also a big problem in the Byzantine Empire. And now you read us a summary.
Yes, so very briefly to sum up, and considering the numerous examples given and due to time reasons not having been given in this talk, it becomes clear that in Byzantium political calculations always came first. As we have seen, diseases or injuries might lead to abdication or deposition, being reasons relevant to state law. But in case of questions of legitimacy, they also could have been neglected if the political wish did require so. These measures achieved their goal more easily if the emperors agreed to them or initiated them themselves. To the contrary, it was easy for an emperor to remain in his office despite of cases of disease and illness if the forces supporting the state, the army, the people of the capital, the senate and the church, incorporated by the patriarch, would agree to the emperor's reduced ability to rule. The emperor's health problems, whether natural or brought about by force, could contribute greatly to political changes, but they also could be pushed aside for political reasons. The role of the physicians involved shows some kind of ambiguity. Their main task, obviously, was a political purpose, the preservation of public appearance and often also the concealment of the health problems of the emperor, but by no means a patient-related health care in the sense of modern medical ethics. And this is the end, and thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah. That's to you.
Thank you. Maybe you could just turn off the PowerPoint, stop sharing, so we could see if someone has questions online. Just the red thing, stop sharing.
Stop share?
Yes.
Exactly.
So if anyone has questions online, please ask them. You can type them in the chat as well. And I would have a question, or rather a set of questions related to the blinding and the cutting off of the nose. First, do you...
All best the same, all best the same.
Sorry.
No.
So sub-question one, do you think that they stopped using the severing of the nose because of the example of Renotmatus who managed to return to the throne despite of it? Or if not, why was he treated more mildly? Because as far as I know, people were blinded before him as well. So why wasn't he blinded and just his nose severed? Second question, we do have a case in Serbian history, the one that inspired us for this conference, of King Stefan Dečanski, who was blinded and then his vision was miraculously restored as he took the throne officially, and now historians have different interpretations today, that maybe he was not blinded at all, that maybe it was faked, maybe that he was partially blinded, his eyes was injured and they managed to heal him. So what are your expert thoughts on the subject? What sort of blinding could it have been if his eyesight was cured? And the last sub-question, you said that there were no emperors who managed to return from after being blinded, and of course that's true, but aside from the example of Stefan Dečanski in Serbia, we have examples in Byzantium of people who were not emperors, but who managed to return to functionality after being blinded. And the example that came to my mind was the general Alexios Philanthropinos, who returned after definitely being blinded. His eyesight wasn't restored, but they called upon him many years later. He was already a blind old man, and yet he was capable to deliver several military victories. So do you think that such examples are simply exceptions and all the blinded emperors weren't competent enough, or that the image of the emperor having to be perfect simply disabled them from trying to take the throne after being blinded, despite the fact that they were maybe politically quite capable of scheming and or governing? Thank you very much. I've overdone it.
So thank you very much for this complex pile of questions, because this is, you clearly see what we have said in the beginning. This is just the tip of the egg, and this is just work in progress. And of course, there are a lot of examples, and there are a lot of methods how to to perform this medical punishments. You also know a lot of methods about castrations, and there are also a lot of methods for blinding. You can do it with some sort of instrument. This instrument can be from wood or it can be from steel. This is an Unterschied. Difference. And then you can heat it and make it burn.
With an instrument, it's always quite mortal.
No, not even, sorry, but with an instrument just put into the eye, it can be also a quite mild form of blood. But if you heat it and make it burning and make it glühend,
heated.
Fiery, there is no way back. And we know also from people suffering from infections and maggots in the eye holes, and there's no way back. But if you use some kind of liquid, some kind of oily liquid, some kind of boiling water, also, you can make it in this, you can perform it reversible. Quite reversible. And if you also, and this is the big problem we have in Byzantine times, if you also have some people, some very good physicians caring for the wound after the performed executions, there's also a chance to make it reversible, to make it, to cure it. And it's also a question of state's reason. If there is someone being blinded with reduced or with lost eyesight coming back to the throne, it must be wanted. It must be wanted. And so we know about some people in Byzantine history not being emperors, because we have seen with the emperors it's something quite special, but some magistrates, some officials coming back into their function, it must be wanted. And a miraculous healing, this is great. A miraculous healing, this is something very wonderful. And now to come back to you, and now you have your opera, because there is one opera about about a woman lost her eyesight, and there is an Egyptian physician coming and doing some kind of abracadabra and hocus pocus, and he's not healing her, but she is just healed upon her belief in Jesus Christ. And this is a very not so common opera, but it's very interesting because you have all these patterns. We also know from history the Egyptian drugs, the Egyptian or Jewish high qualified eye healers, physicians specialized on eye diseases, the role of eye diseases in the Egyptian medical Papyrus Ebers, for example. And then you have also mixed up some iatromagical motifs coming from ancient or Greco-Egyptian texts of ritual power and wandering into Byzantine medical books. And this is the next point. And then you have the historical connections with the kind of interconnection, Verflechtung, connection with state's law. And this is the first point. And the second point with the nose, with the Justinian Renaud method, this also is coming, the practice of cutting off the nose. It's an Oriental practice, and we have in this time when he was reigning, we have a lot of Oriental practices, and
we have the legalists know it. We have the in the legislation of Constantine V, the Ecloga, in the Ecloga. The Ecloga is partly Oriental rite. It is and there you find all, not all. We spoken about punishments, but quite none of these punishments is mentioned in the Byzantine legislation. You have these examples, quite all of these examples. You have only from the historians, from miracles, from many sources, but not from the legislation. In the legislation, only in the Ecloga, they are, some of them are mentioned. We have awful punishments, and the strangulation, for example, not the strangulation with the furka, for example, mentioned in the Ecloga, and in some examples, but not if you read the Basilica, the legislation of the 10th century, you find quite nothing of this. No? The punishment in the legislation is the Eastern Empire, the Byzantine Empire, is very quite full empire. There is quite no punishment. What the punishment is, I have a list, not published, a list of about 20-25 types of punishment, all from other sources than the legislation. That's also an interesting fact, the reality and the theory.
Thank you very much. I think Professor Monter wants to reply about the operas.
No, I wish to comment something that I had to skip over this morning because it seems to fit here insofar as you talked about age. Of my female kings in Europe, there is only one who really acquires the throne at a total child, in this case, the age of 6. And this is in Sweden, and her father is killed in battlefield in Germany. They are in the middle of the 30 Years' War. In other words, she's born, she becomes king in 1632. The war drags on another 16 years. She is the regency in Sweden is set up by was set up by the king before he departed for Germany and eventually for his death. It was a 5-person regency, and the regents ended up, if any of them died, I can't remember how it actually worked. This seems strange, but implausibly this system worked very well. That is to say, the 6-year-old heiress is raised by 5 ministers and learns how to sit at a council of state as soon as they consider she's old enough. And I think that's about the age of 12, because that'll fit Roman law. And then she turns out to be a very bright student. So by the age of 18, the Council of Regents decide, or they set her, she's been sitting on the council for a while listening, and by the age of 18, the regents decide that she is old enough to preside over the council. She does, as soon as she is therefore given preeminence of a way, but not official no coronation. And she decides, in fact, to postpone her coronation until the war is over, which takes another several years. She then ends up holding a wonderful celebratory coronation at the age of 24, and 4 years later abdicates, changes religion to adopt the religion of the group that they had been fighting, Sweden had been fighting against in the 30 Years' War. It's a sufficiently adequate excuse. She had other probably more personal reasons. She avoided marriage. There's only the second European female monarch who avoided marriage, and lived happily ever after as a Catholic in Rome and Sweden. And she named her successor, who was a cousin and a Protestant, whom she did not want to marry.
Now, for the Byzantine Empire, we can explain these problems because we have two systems of succession. No? The accession, the successions by dynasty, and the normal and ancient succession by appointment by the from part of the other factors, and this was always the last one, not the dynastical one, was also the regular one, and the dynasty was always postponed, and so other factors was often in struggle against the dynastical system. And so we can explain that no emperor who passed through this dynastical system was without problems. Ivan.
Thank you. I would like to return a bit to the punishment. Of course, the punishment is very cultural phenomenon, and I would like to suggest, yes, in Ekloga, the cut of the nose is quite well presented, but also in this elaboration, Slavic elaboration of the Ekloga law for judging the people, and this is the punishment for many crimes related to some sexual interrelations that are not okay, let's say, for the ideas of the society. So I was thinking about this. The nose is very visible part of the face, and this is somehow to represent this guy or lady or something as a bad one, because when you blind somebody, he's not only unfit, he's incapable to rule. And the nose is somehow morally unfit. I think so. Usually this is not my way of thinking, but I think this. And another, let's say, question. In the situation of divine king, the disease of the king makes him dangerous for the people. There is an interdependence between the king and the people, and when the king is ill, the people could be pandemic too, let's say. The Byzantine emperors are not divine kings, of course, but is there, maybe not, I do not know, this is a question, is there some memory, some tradition from these times in the cases of diseases which are not so hard, destroying the body and so on, or even for them? I am not sure that I was clear with the question.
No, you were perfectly clear, and I think this is a very good idea, and it's a very these are really very good thoughts. The first of all is the thing with the nose, and this is uttered very clearly by this medical author, by Theophilos, who said the sight of someone mutilated by cutting off the nose is very very cruel, and it's very terrifying. And so this is the fact of terrifying is also mixed in this fact of repellent, you know. And this is what you've said. This is if you blind someone, he's blinded, he's ineffective. But if you cut off the nose, he's an ugly and repellent person to view. This is the first thing. And the second thing is also this kind of being stigmatized by some illness, by some disease, and therefore not considered to be fit to rule. And this was in some cases, and this is the tradition going back to the legend of the plague in Thebes with Oedipus, and being stigmatized by this moral illness, which is represented by the plague, which encounters the city of Thebes, and Oedipus is the responsible because he's the king, and and the plague came because of his moral problems. And this is continued in the age of Justinian, because Justinian is considered by Procopius as the source of the Justinianic plague, because he's a demonic ruler, and this is interesting because he was healed from the plague. He was considered much more demonic, because he is someone who is so demonic even to overcome such a pandemic. And this is very dangerous. And this is a kind of being stigmatized by disease. And this is a very big window you've opened. And this is a window which deserves a lot of research. But this was just a very short answer to a very big question.
Ja, ich sage jetzt, dass du es magst.
Ja.
In the program is announced that I will be the moderator for the next 3 or 4 speakers, because you remembered, because of small illness, disease of my voice, I would prefer to pass the moderation to my colleague Isabel Grimm-Stadelmann, and I will be only her assistant.
Yes, and it's not your nose, it's just your voice.
Yes, yeah.
The problem...
No, that is not true. The nose is the reason for my voice.
But
in this case, you know it. No?
But it's still fitting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
She's still sitting. That's an intern problem of the noise.
Scheiße, pity you have to keep up with me for the next session, and I will do so. And if it's good for you, Nina.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's take a very short break since we're a little behind schedule. Grab a coffee and then be back for the next session. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.